It's good. We've been waiting for it for a while. We're pretty excited. So
Yep.
let's begin.
All right, super. Well, so we're going to give our audience a little bit of time to join as we're getting started. Aaron, where are you today?
I am in Bratislava, Slovakia at 3 degrees Celsius. So chipper.
Ooh. Well, we are at 50 degrees, but that's not Celsius. Chris, I'm in Prague, Czech Republic, 50 degrees, as I mentioned. Chris, where are you?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's chilly, roughly 45 degrees here today.
Excellent. Albert?
I'm in London, the UK, and I'm not sure what temperature it is, but it's almost sunset.
Oh, the sun has set. The sun has fallen for us too. So, well, wonderful. It looks like we have a bunch of participants already joining. Thank you, everybody, for your patience as we wait for more people to join the call. We'll be getting started really shortly. And we are on Facebook too, if you want to share the link with any of your friends.
Facebook link right now.
Yep.
Now that I've successfully downloaded the new Georgia Project app.
Ooh, excellent.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's get started, everybody. As I said, welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Julia Bryan, and I'm the Global Chair of Democrats Abroad. I'll be the moderator today, and I'm joined by Aaron Fishbone, who's going to be helping with the call as well. We really appreciate your support. Thanks to your donations, we're going to be able to reach hundreds of Georgia voters abroad through our digital ads and our phone banking. And if you are a Georgia voter or you know a Georgia voter abroad, please get in touch with us and go to help@votefromabroad.org, or you can register now at votefromabroad.org. We would love to hear from you. As you can tell, we're really focused on getting out the vote for the runoffs. And there's a good reason for this. Besides being our major mission, we also know that we can really make a difference back home through our votes. In November, we sent almost 19,000 votes back to Georgia, well over the 12,000 margin of victory that Biden won the state by. And we were integral and important part of making sure we won the White House. So we're working hard to make sure that happens again this January, and that we help win the Senate runoffs for Ossoff and Warnock and flip the Senate. So today I'm really delighted to be joined by a wonderful group of people who are also working on this election. We'll hear from first we're going to hear from Albert Scardino. Mr. Scardino is a Pulitzer Prize winning editor. And years ago, he founded the Georgia Gazette, a newspaper focused on Georgia politics. He later became an editor at the New York Times and was then press secretary to New York City Mayor David Dinkins before moving to London, where he became an executive editor of the Guardian newspaper. We're looking forward to hearing from him about the political landscape in Georgia as it stands today. Albert, are you ready to take it away?
Thank you, Julia. I'm happy to, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to join you. I think I vote these days in South Carolina, just across the river from Georgia, but spent the my first several elections were as a Georgia voter. So I've paid close attention to Georgia politics for a long time. The runoff is a not an exact repeat of Georgia history, but it certainly is a very, very strong echo of everything that's happened in Georgia in the last 250 years, since long before it became a state. If you can imagine a map of the southeastern United States today, everything from the Okefenokee Swamp near the Atlantic coast to Memphis was Georgia. Georgia ran from the Atlantic coast all the way to the Mississippi, and it was by far the largest of the 13 English colonies. It was nearly the size of California today, and it was that vast territory that became a state, the biggest and the most sparsely populated of the first 13, even when you included the people of the 5 native nations within its boundaries. Georgia started life as a socialist experiment, something that would give an awful lot of Republicans in Georgia hives today. Every colonist who registered to join the Georgia experiment received a town lot in Savannah, to build a small house and a parcel of land just on the edge of town to grow vegetables. The land could not be sold or passed through inheritance. Everyone was guaranteed a job in a new enterprise, which was the silk industry. Slavery was banned, so were lawyers. And so, in a very odd twist that had more to do with English history than with the colonies, so were Catholics. But all other Christians were welcome, and the first registered member of the colony was a Jew. Those 5 native nations all had treaties recognizing their rights to their territory in exchange for giving some of their lands to the English settlers. The Creek Nation on the Atlantic coast, the Cherokee Nation in the north, the Seminoles along the border with Florida, and the Choctaw and Chickasaw in the western part of the colony. The native population when George Washington became president was probably about double the population of whites and blacks. They were mostly settled farmers. They were fishermen and traders. The Cherokees had adopted a written constitution with a bicameral legislature, and virtually every citizen there was literate in their own language at an early age, both writing and reading. I mention the Cherokees in particular because they adopted most of the legal principles of the white nation on their borders. With their constitution and their respect for law, they thought their nation was saved from being taken over by the surrounding states. But they failed at one very important aspect of life in those days in Georgia. They weren't white. Georgia wanted them gone, along with the 4 other native nations. Almost all of the original colonies had claims to land west of the Appalachians. Like Georgia, North and South Carolina, Virginia, even Connecticut claimed land out to the Mississippi River. Massachusetts held title to what would become Maine. All of these other states, very quickly after the adoption of the Constitution, ceded their western lands to the federal government, and the government then began to sell them off to settlers. It was land sales that provided virtually all of the federal income in the early days of the country, along with import duties. Georgia held off its cession of its western lands, and this is the reason for my digressing into all of these other states. Georgia held off its cession of its western lands, eventually negotiating a secret deal with the federal government. If the national government would agree to remove all of the native people within its borders, Georgia would give up 2/3 of its land. The secret compact of 1802 wrapped up the deal, and it remained secret for many years afterwards while the federal government proceeded to remove the natives and move them to Oklahoma. The next step for the Georgia government involved the preservation and expansion of slavery. As the anti-slavery movement emerged in the northern states, the South looked to the Senate as the security for what it called its way of life. If they could maintain the balance in the Senate between slave and anti-slave forces, they could prevent any legislation or constitutional amendment passing that would harm their corporate interest. In other words, they could keep abolition at bay. Yet each time a new free state was created out of the western lands of the northern states, 2 more anti-slave senators came to Washington. Maine, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, all free. The South responded by carving Kentucky out of Virginia, Tennessee out of North Carolina, and Alabama and Mississippi out of what had been Western Georgia. Then came Florida out of Spain. So these southern states were in a race to maintain equilibrium in the Senate. And it's remarkable that here we are, 216 years later, and we're engaged in exactly the same battle. The southern states couldn't keep pace as far as population growth was concerned, so they fell behind in the House of Representatives with each census. But so long as they could maintain balance in the Senate and even gain some advantage through superior understanding of the rules, and their economic system of white supremacy could remain protected. The only break in the system came after the South lost the Civil War, but it proved temporary. With Lee's failure of his invasion of the North at Gettysburg, the South's hopes collapsed for a stalemate with the Union. At Appomattox, slavery came to an end, but not white supremacy, and not the rural agricultural economy built on Black labor. With the rebellious states not yet readmitted to the Union, President Grant and a Republican-dominated Senate were able to get around what the Southern senators had blocked for so long. And they were able to get into the Constitution the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, guaranteeing equal protection and extending the right to vote. The door slammed shut again in the 1880s, and for the next 70 years, the Southern bloc of senators, once the Southern states were readmitted to the Union, the Southern senators managed to reestablish their blockade on any new civil rights legislation from the 1880s until the 1960s. They did it with, when they couldn't maintain the balance numerically, they maintained it with a superior knowledge of the rules: filibusters, seniority for committee chairmanships, cloture. The rules and the discipline of the minority kept Southerners in power at home and in Washington. The recent history has had a number of special twists. The Georgia flag was changed in the 1950s to incorporate the Confederate battle flag. It had not been that way for a long time, and it cost the last Democratic governor his control of the governor's mansion when he managed to get the flag altered. He lost the next election. But that flag was part of a process that was used for maintaining white supremacy. Another one peculiar to Georgia that has had very lasting consequences was the county unit system. It was a system very similar to the Electoral College, and that every county in Georgia, and Georgia had more counties than any state in the Union other than Texas, every county had at least 2 county unit votes, and the maximum number of county unit votes that any county could have was 6. So Atlanta, with a population of about 500,000 people in Fulton County, could be outvoted when it came to electing governors and other state officials by 3 counties in rural Georgia with a total population of 5,000 people. It was an end to that system, which was part of the one man, one vote rules of the Supreme Court ruled in the 1960s. When I first voted in Georgia in 1966, there were virtually no Republicans in the state. The Republican Party had candidates who showed up from time to time on the general election ballot, but the election in Georgia until the 1960s was the Democratic primary, because Republicans never stood a chance in the general election. There were very few Republicans in the state legislature, and no Republicans had served in statewide office for many years. So the result of all of this was that the Democrats controlled, still with a system of white supremacy in the rural parts of the state, prevented people from registering to vote, and managed to keep the state Democratic, but similar to what it had been in the 1880s. A place where it would be difficult to exist and thrive if you weren't white. When Lyndon Johnson managed to get the Civil Rights Bill passed in 1964 and then the Voting Rights Act in 65, that began the system of unraveling Georgia's politics, and huge numbers of white voters switched their party registration from Republican to Democrat. That continued until very recently, when things that Chris and Nse will be talking about, I'm sure, the population became much more urbanized, and Atlanta became such a dominant part of the state's economy and a dominant part of the dominant population center in the state. But up until the 1960s and 70s, when when school busing began in the 1970s, Republicans had starved the school systems all over the South of funds, using the same anti-government spending philosophy that had been prevalent in the South since the 1840s and 50s. There was a very, very weak public school system. It is still among the worst in the country. A very, very weak university system, unless you were creating a university for training people in agriculture. And the only, and a very, very poor healthcare and healthcare systems. So the white supremacy control of Georgia government has left the state with a legacy of poor healthcare, poor education, and very limited hobbled economic system, which is now beginning to change because of what's happening in Atlanta. This is a topic that I could bore the world about for a long time, but I'll stop there so that to give those who are going to be talking more about the current demographics of the state and what's happening in Georgia politics today, an opportunity to build on that.
Well, thank you so much, Albert. We really appreciate that. And again, I think the work that you did in the past in Georgia, it speaks for itself, and that was such a really important newspaper in its time. And the progressive work that you've done in the state is just thank you so much for that. I know how difficult it is to do that, and especially during that time period. Now I see that we have another special speaker who's just joined us, Senator Sheikh Rahman. Hi, Sheikh. How are you?
Hey, how you doing? I'm sorry. I told you yesterday that I'll be at a meeting with John Ossoff this morning and try to get him to speak to you all for a minute. But what happened in Georgia, the governor actually called for special session at the Georgia Senate, or not session, actually hearing, and I'm part of the government oversight committee. So I was preparing for that. So I would postpone that when I was trying to get ready for the stuff. That's why I've been a little late.
Oh, no worries. Don't worry. We're so glad that you could join us. And I just want to introduce you very briefly. So we are so happy to see Sheikh. He is a great friend of Democrats abroad. He's a state senator in Georgia. He's the first immigrant, the first Muslim American to serve in the Georgia State Senate. He was elected in 2018, and he represents the 5th Senate District in Gwinnett County. So we're really delighted he had a little bit of time to join us and say a few words about the state of the race right now. So Sheikh, what can you tell us about what's happening right now? I know there's so much going on.
Well, first of all, one good thing is almost 1 million absentee ballot applications have been received already. I mean, this is a phenomenon. We wouldn't even think that would happen.
Right.
So everything is going smooth so far. So far, the key thing will be turnout.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're looking at this moment in terms of application that we received, and people already receiving, absentee ballot. Actually, my mother-in-law applied, at the beginning, like a few months ago, and she already had her ballot.
Right.
And in Gwinnett County, in Georgia, most of the place will already have the drop-off box.
Right.
So people are already dropping this week, as of a couple of days ago. So things are going good, and everybody's excited. As I said, Warnock has his team set up a long time ago, also finalized all his team member. He just hired day before yesterday, hired API coordinator.
Oh,
we
great.
didn't had it. So I suggested him, hey, you got to hire, you have a coordinator for all different, but API made such a big contribution in Georgia specifically. Our turnout was 151% compared to 16 or 18.
Woof.
I mean, we still have probably almost 100,000 API community that not registered. I'm specific, the reason I'm talking about the API, because API community made a big contribution in last election, especially in Gwinnett County, what I'm in right now.
Right.
Gwinnett County is the home of, I have constituency, they come from 100 different countries. speak more than 100 different languages. And 1/3 of my folks weren't even born in this country. 1/3 were born in the state of Georgia. Only 1/3 of the people that I represent were actually born in Georgia. So such a diverse, this is the first time, 2018, we turned Gwinnett County blue.
Yep.
This time, what happened is we cleaned everything, even though if you look around the country, that local and state seat, the Democrat lost, but in Georgia, we gained one state Senate seat. It's in Gwinnett County. We gained 2 House seats, one of them Gwinnett County. In Gwinnett County, we changed district attorney, we changed sheriff. Now we have entire control of entire school board, entire county commission, and the county commission chair. So, and this is the place where we have majority of the API. We have people from all. That's one of the reasons I was, I was convinced that, hey, John, you got to hire somebody API specifically. They can go reach out to these folks, because we know that still a lot of people need to be registered.
Absolutely.
And turn out. So everything going smooth so far, I think. Last week, Andrew Young came from New York. He's in Georgia now. We had a kickoff event for API committee. That's what we did in last Sunday. And definitely other communities, Latino community and African communities, already they are involved, they're organized. So I'm optimistic. The way the things is working in Georgia, I'm really optimistic. And I know that you are doing your part. You are doing your part. You appreciate it. I think Democrat abroad is probably one of the organizations is underappreciated in this country, because people don't realize what you all do. That's the fact. I know being involved with the DNC and hearing from what you all do is very important. Is very, very important. But you are making a difference. Because if you look at Georgia, we won only by 12,000 some vote. And if I'm correct, from your number, the 26,000 Georgian requested absentee ballot in last election, and I believe 19,000 returned their ballot.
That's right.
So if you look at it, that's a huge number.
Yep.
In terms of the number, the number that Democrat own. So it's not going to be easy. I'm sure it's not going to be easy. But we are trying to do whatever it takes to get the turnout, not only in Metro Atlanta. I was speaking recently, just only Metro Atlanta, but we are having John Ossoff and Warnock. They're having even now outside Metro Atlanta. He had an event yesterday. John Ossoff and Warnock, both of them had an event this past weekend, actually, as of yesterday, outside Metro Atlanta. So they're reaching out. They are reaching out entire state, no doubt. The team is reaching out.
Can you tell us, what do you think is the most impactful thing that we can do to reach out to the Asian American and Pacific Islander audience in Georgia to help make sure they're reaching out to their friends and family abroad? What do you think would be the best thing for us?
I think API committee is very active right now. Since we have a coordinator, they're doing a lot of postcards. We have folks not only from Democrat abroad. I have California Democrats, even some of the DNC member, if you know, Umeto, what's his name is, I'm trying to, anyway, but they're working out of California and all around the country. Yep. I'm actually, tomorrow I'm doing a radio interview. We are doing a video with Indian Southeast Asian media. They're doing a radio interview and doing a commercial. We are trying to work out in API committee. They're trying to do a lot of television commercial. So a lot of stuff going on. What you all can do, one thing I know that this, everybody contributes some of this, big organization. Stacey Abrams getting a lot of money. She's trying to distribute, give away a lot of money to some of the big organizations. But there are some of the API organization, small organization, they can use some help. I can probably send you a link or something, some of the PAC that they're a small organization, specifically work with API, some of the minority group. If you all can help contribute to some of this small organization, I think that will going to go a long way.
That would be great.
One thing I'll suggest, because we have during the last election, we had like Chinese American, they had their own yard sign, Vietnamese American, their own yard sign for Biden, Filipino, they see blue, the South Asian. So everybody, they spend so much money themselves without getting help from the main campaign.
Yep.
But they're kind of broke. They can use some money. That's what I would say. Basically.
Okay, well, that's great
But
to hear.
I'm going to send you a couple of links that you can spread it out to your organization.
We absolutely
These are
will.
the small organizations, the small.
Yep, we absolutely will. And I also love the fact that you have over 100 countries that you represent, because you know what? I bet they have friends and family who live in some of those 100 countries, and we would love to help them make sure they're voting. So just so everybody knows on this call, Sheikh and I are working together to make sure we are spreading the message as far and wide as possible. And we so appreciate his support. He's been a long-term friend of DA's. Whenever we see each other at the DNC meetings, we are always brainstorming how we get out the vote. And we really appreciate your time so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm going to get off
Okay.
in a minute because I have to go join another meeting, get ready for that, for the stupid, hearing tomorrow.
Oh,
this is just nothing going to happen, but they're Republican trying to save their face. So that's why we'll have a special hearing tomorrow.
Well, fingers crossed, thumbs held, and thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And I'll talk to you really soon.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye. I'm going to come and see you all after the pandemic is over.
Ooh,
I'm going to come
absolutely.
travel around the world too, because
Good.
I represent so many countries, it's unbelievable.
Yes, you definitely need to. Well, we will make a tour for you. Thank you, Senator. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So our next speaker is Chris Huttman. And Chris is, someone who has joined us to tell us a little bit more details about what's happening these days in the changing demographics of Georgia. We've just heard from the senator about the Asian Pacific Islanders grouping and the many different people that he's representing and how they're getting out the vote. But we're really happy that Chris could join us to tell us a little bit more details. He's the research director of Canal Partners Media and is based in Atlanta. And thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. And we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Go ahead.
Well, thanks so much. And I've been a long time Georgia, numbers guy that's helped out with a lot of statewide and local campaigns. And so I just wanted to just give everybody like a little bit of a deeper dive on, some of the numbers of how Biden won. Obviously, if you are a registered voter in Georgia and a Democrat, it's been a tough, 20 years or so since the last time we won a top of the ticket race. So it's very exciting. And I just wanted to give people a little bit of a look under the hood of kind of like how it happened. So I was looking after the election at kind of the various groups that make up the Georgia electorate that are old and new, and thought I would share kind of what those groups were. And kind of coincidentally, they kind of cleaved very evenly into fifths. So 3/5 of the electorate are what I would call the super voters. And these are people that had voted in 2 or 3 of the past 3 presidential elections before the current one. And they split about evenly, so about a fifth each. There are super voters who vote in Democratic primaries. These people are roughly 58% Black, 33% white. They turned out at about 95% in 2020. And our estimate is that Biden got about 90% of the votes from that group. And then there's super voters who vote in Republican primaries. They also turned out at about 94%. So about 1 million voters in each of these groups. And we estimate that Biden got about 10% of the vote there. And as you can probably imagine, only 1% Black and 93% white. And then the final group, which is a bit larger than the 2 Democratic and Republican super voter groups in total numbers, is people that have voted in 2 or 3 presidential elections but haven't voted in a primary recently. So it's probably hard for people like us to imagine the type of voter who would vote in, a lot of presidential and governor's races and stuff like that, but then not bother to vote in a primary, but they do exist. There's about 1.3 million of them. Just under 1 million actually voted, 74% turnout, 26% Black, 62% white. So pretty representative kind of overall of the actual state. And we estimate that Biden got about 45%. So this is like the old Georgia is a good way of thinking about this. It's a total of 3.5 million voters. 3 million of them voted. They made up 60% of the total electorate. All told, all together, average them all out, they're about 28% black and 63% white. And we think Biden probably got about 47% with this group. So if you think back to 2016, when Hillary got about 45, if you think back to 2012, when Obama got about the same amount, if you think back to 2008, when Obama got 47, this is who these people are. This is the Georgia that used to vote that kind of reliably, voted in the past. And then one thing that, Trump has really changed, and it's not just here, obviously, but in every state in the country, is he's just inspired a huge amount of people that weren't super voters to come out and vote. So I call these like the surge voters, and they would be characterized as people that voted either 0 or only one time in a previous presidential election. And since most of these people overwhelmingly have not voted in primaries, I split them into kind of white voters and non-white voters as a way to analyze them. So there are about 2 million, voters on the voter file that are white, who hadn't voted in, more than one previous presidential election, and about 1 million of them voted for about a 54% turnout. Keep in mind, these people are 100% white. We actually think Biden got just under 40% with these voters, about 37%. And then there are just over 2 million non-white voters who are kind of new to the electorate, and just under 1 million of them voted, so a turnout of 42%. They're 54% black. And then a lot of the people, as the senator we're talking about, that are new to the electorate are neither black nor white. So you have a lot of Asians, Hispanics, Latinos, Native Americans, people who register as other, which could be multiracial, a lot of other categories. And then a lot of unknown. So unknown people are people that when they've signed up to register to vote, either via the driver's license, which is the main way that people register, or through a voter registration form, they left the box blank for race, which you can do now. And we're seeing more people do that. We think that like those people kind of allocate similar to the people that do state their race. So on a statewide level, maybe close to 10% are unknown now. But we think, about a third of those people are black, about, half are white, similar to the people that are known, roughly. Anyway, with these voters, these non-super voters who are not white, obviously we think Biden did really well, about 73%. So you take these super voters, which represent about 3 million of the total votes cast of the 5 million total votes, and Biden gets about 47%. There's your old Georgia. And then you take your non-super voters, your surge voters from this year, which is about 40% of the electorate, 2 million people. Biden gets about 55 with them. Averages all together, and Biden gets just to 50%. And what's interesting about these surge voters is that when you look under the hood of the white voters, if you just isolate them to kind of the 11 county metro Atlanta region, which would be like the 5 main counties, and then any county that touches 2 of the 5 main counties, even though these voters are 100% white, we actually think Biden got about 53% of the vote from these white voters, which is a lot higher than we normally get from white voters. So we are seeing a changing Georgia. That's we're headed kind of more in the direction, if you're familiar, if you watched kind of what's happened to Virginia, states like that over the last 20 years, where you're just really starting to see a coalition emerge of, obviously, our black voters would be the largest part of the coalition, but then you're starting to see, other racial minorities, Asians, Hispanics, and then college educated whites kind of come together. And I wanted to talk real quickly about the runoff. So when we look at the 2018 runoff, we had John Barrow get about 48%, and we only had 1.4 million people roughly vote in that race. And when we look like where those voters came from, the vast majority of them came from the super voters who had previously voted in Democratic and Republican primaries. So about 40% from each group were either Democrats or Republican, and then about 20% were from these other groups. So when we look today at who's requested a ballot, we see that for the super voters who are Democrats, actually 31% of their total turnout from this year's 2020 election has already requested an absentee ballot, which is great. And when you compare that to Republicans, it's only 20%. Now, Republicans took much more advantage of in-person early voting, and that won't start until December 14th. So I think once we hit the end of that first week of in-person early voting, and we can compare, the absentees, which we've done really well with, to the in-person, which is more split, we'll get a better idea. But gotta like the numbers that you're seeing so far. The people who, so 31% of, ballots requested of the total vote in 2020 for these Democratic super voters. And then the other great thing is when you look at the non-surge voters, so this is the real question, this is the real, million or billion-dollar question, as it might be for the runoff, is, are the Republicans going to be able to get their, their kind of surge voters out, which you've heard about a lot about, the shy Trumpers or whoever. And then are we going to be able to get our surge voters out, which would be kind of like the anti-Trumpers, right? And so the really interesting news there is that among these surge voters who aren't white, the absentee ballot requests equal 17% of the total turnout from November, which is pretty good for a group that hasn't really voted a lot in elections before. It's actually higher at 13% than these super voters who don't vote in primaries. So that's a good sign. That's the non-white surge voters. And then when you compare that to the white surge voters, it's 15%. So the non-white voters who are the new to the electorate are turning out, at least for absentee requests, at a higher rate than the white voters. And then when you break that down again, you actually see that these kind of core metro new white voters who lean much more Democratic than their rural counterparts, they're actually requesting ballots at 18% rate, which is basically the same as the non-white voters. And the kind of more rural white surge voters are only at 12%. So everything that we're seeing looks really good, really encouraging. I think, like, again, these absentee requests only really tell part of the story. When we look at the general election, absentee was about 1.4 million out of the 5 million. So there's obviously a lot of other voters out there, but everything we're seeing so far looks pretty good. And I'll turn it over back to you guys. That'd just be an interesting look at kind of how Georgia turned blue.
Well, thank you so much. And I think we have someone who's just joined us, who's going to share a little bit more details about some of our surge voters. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. And Nse, are you here?
I am. Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. Let me just find you. Oh, there you are. Okay, I'm going to add you to the spotlight. Yay. So we really appreciate you making the time to come and join us. And let me introduce you. This is Nse Ufot. She's the CEO of the New Georgia Project and one of the major players in getting out the vote in Georgia this fall. She is a hero, a shiro. We were really excited because the New Georgia Project registered more than 50,000 Georgians this year and also made sure voters had the resources they needed to not only register, but also to get to the polls so they could vote. They did a lot of other stuff as well. We are so thrilled you could join us. And we also want to note that Nse is not only a Georgian, but she was also a Georgian abroad and a Dems abroad alumni. She's very much beloved and remembered from her time in Canada. So can you share a little bit about your time in, not in Canada, but in the New Georgia Project and what you guys have done this year and what you're doing in the runoffs? We'd love to hear.
Okay. I will. So one, thank you so much for having me. Yes, I very much remember my time fondly with the Democrats Abroad Canada chapter as when I truly found my people and like really felt like not necessarily an expat, but like, okay, I found my folks, the people I can organize with and also drink delicious beers with. And so I will forever be grateful and indebted to this community. And yeah, so we are the New Georgia Project. To date, we've registered nearly 500,000 Georgians of color and young people to vote in all 159 of Georgia's counties. That's probably the work that we're best known for. But for us, it was never about just racking up voter registrants and the number of registrants, that we are working to build a Georgia where that there's a culture of no safe seats, right? That people don't feel like they have lifetime appointments, that people feel elected officials, candidates, campaigns, parties feel like they need to ask Georgians for their vote, that people are tapped into the power that they have to hire and fire elected officials, right? And so that's what we want, that's what we're doing. So what that meant is on the march to the November 3rd general election, while the Biden mobilizing campaign didn't knock on a single door. And this isn't to disparage them, but after deep consultation with public health experts, our board, our staff, canvassers, volunteers, we decided to go back on the doors and knocked on 400,000 doors. And we're still in the middle of a pandemic. We make millions of phone calls, millions of text messages, and we'll continue to do the same thing on the March to January 5th. We plan to have knocked on 2 million doors by the end of 2020. And so high quality face-to-face conversations about things that matter is how we are expanding the electorate and helping encourage that increased enthusiasm and participation in our elections.
Well, that is amazing. And can you tell us like what's happening now specifically with the Senate runoffs? How is that work different? Because I know we were all like geared up for the general, and then suddenly we have these other elections to work on. How have you guys like regained your energy, and just refocused and move forward? What's been your secret of success here?
American Thanksgiving helped.
Good.
All right. So that was cool. And just an opportunity. Listen, they say before the Enlightenment, you chopping wood and carrying water. And after the Enlightenment, you chop wood and carry water. And so it is our plan to do the very same things, but on a much more aggressive, much more truncated timeline. So, what that looks like is, again, we are averaging about 1,000 volunteer shifts a day. And people from all over the country can sign up on our mobilized website. You can RSVP for a volunteer shift. We're sending phone calls, sending text messages to Georgia voters. The voter registration deadline is December 7th. And so we are working, our research shows that there are about 23,000 Georgians that are turning 18 between November 3rd and January 5th. And we are endeavoring to register as many of them as possible. We've had Zoom birthday parties in consultation with, high school guidance counselors and high school principals. We are having a food giveaway with Lloyd Pierce. He is the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks. And while we're out there, people, if you are not registered to vote, now is the opportunity to do so. And so the idea is, one, always direct voter contact, because that is what we privilege. That is what our research shows is what works. Yeah. But then also, doing what we can to sort of capture eyeballs and ears, hearts, minds, imaginations. There are people who have registered voters with us. There are people who have donated to us and given us money who were shocked by the results of the November 3rd general election. And so we expect there to be a surge of voters who were eligible but didn't vote in the November election because they didn't think that their vote mattered, right? That they thought that Georgia was a red state that was going to vote for Trump, and that, their input, their contribution didn't matter at all. And now that the entire world knows that Trump won 71% of white voters in Georgia and still lost the election, that people understand that Georgia is now a proper and legitimate battleground state where every vote matters, every vote counts.
That's right. And for everyone on this call who's abroad, remember, you go to votefromabroad.org to make sure you are registered this year. Registration deadlines are December 7th. And if you're already registered, you can go to votefromabroad.org and find out where you can go on the Georgia election website to download your ballot. Sometimes Georgia will send you an email, but sometimes you have to go and look for your ballot. So make sure you're doing that, everybody, any Georgia voter. And if you have any questions, just go to help@votefromabroad.org. And so, we'd love to, we are working with different groups, and we'd love to work with you to not only send our volunteers to you, because of course we have a lot of volunteers who are very, very eager to help, but also if you are, when you're doing outreach, we'd please send people, everyone knows someone abroad. Everyone has a friend or a family member who's outside the United States, and they need to make sure they're like going, oh yes, you can vote too. We want to make sure everyone knows they have that opportunity to make a difference. And we are so happy that we were able to send back 19,000 votes for in November, and we're trying to do that again. Because you're right.
When you think about the fact that the margin was 13,000 votes, I'm not going to give Democrats abroad all the credit.
No.
But just know that more Democrats abroad voted than the margin of victory for the Biden-Harris ticket.
That's right.
That's power.
It is. And we were, because our votes were counted, some of them were counted last. We think of ourselves at that last baton running across the finish line, carrying the race with everybody else. And we are so happy to be working with teams like you guys to bring in that victory. It's so fantastic. So we have a bunch of questions for you. If you have any time, we just go. Oh, wonderful. Aaron, what's our first question? Aaron Fishbone.
Hello. Sorry, I've been busy responding to people in the chat. There is so much engagement and interest. Okay, sorry. The first question is, what is the best way for people, all the energy we have on the chat, to phone bank or text bank? Are there organizations in addition to New Georgia Project you'd recommend, maybe to help spread the love a little bit? How can all these people who are looking for ways to plug in from here do so? I know you sort of covered it with Julie a little bit, but there's a lot of interest pent up in the chat right now.
Okay, so there are a couple of things. So one, I'm going to drop our volunteer RSVP link in the chat.
Great.
Right. So we're on this platform called Mobilize. And Mobilize will have all of our volunteer shifts and all the ways that people can participate, right? I think that for folks who have an international phone number, a lot of the phone banking apps do require you to have a US phone number. So there are a number of ways for you to do that. But I would also encourage you to lean in if you have relationships with people, that what we know about relational organizing teaches us that hearing from somebody who you know and you have a relationship with is much more effective than hearing from like a celebrity, for example. That if there are your cousins and coworkers and college roommates who are Georgia voters, being like a nice little lovely note, like, hey, see, Georgia is at the top. Have you voted yet? Are you voting early? Have you made a voting plan? Like, we need to get annoying with our circles and spheres of influence. And here's why. Because we are competing with a lot of noise, right? We're talking about the major US holidays, or just the high holidays, if you will. So Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, New Year's. And then we're also competing with, corporations who are working to get their sort of end of the year in the black nut. So like we're being inundated with commercials and all of these ads, et cetera. And voter fatigue is real. I know that many of you on this call know that the US has the longest election season of any country, hands down. We've been at this for 3.5 years, right? And so voter fatigue is real. And so again, the encouragement, centering joy, and getting people to see that like everyone is doing it, that this is important, that they shouldn't leave their power on the table. These are all of the messages that we know work and will encourage people. But I will make sure to drop the Mobilize link in the chat so that people can volunteer with us. We're doing phones, we're doing texts, we're doing doors, we're doing postcards. So if you can't phone bank or text or whatever, we will people can request postcards in groups of 10, 25, 50, and we'll give you a list of Georgia voters or people who need to be reminded to register to vote, or who need to be reminded that there's an election January 5th, or that early voting starts December 14th. And we'll send you postcards. They have these lovely messages on the front, on the back. You can put a handwritten note like rooting for you from Belgrade or whatever, with the idea being that the eyes of the world are on Georgia voters, and we are hoping that they show up one more time.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for that. And then we have Aaron, do we have another question? I know there's a couple of questions about issues. What was that?
Yeah, we do. We have a whole bunch of questions. A lot of us are extremely active on social media. That's one of the ways that we can reach those people and bug them back home, as well as find those Georgians abroad. So what are you hearing from people on the ground, from voters and prospective voters? What are the issues that matter to them? I mean, of course, we hear a lot from what's coming out of the campaigns, but what are you hearing as you all are interacting with people on the ground? What are the issues we should be sharing and talking about on our social media and in our conversations?
Okay, I'll be honest. So at the core of our work is a very aggressive research agenda. So we're constantly testing messages, testing issues, focus groups, polling, what's working, what's not, what will inspire people to act, etc. So for voters under 40, the number one issue that people have taken to the polls with them as they evaluate candidates is racial justice. Is race and racism and racial oppression, right? So this is for voters basically under 40. Voters across the board in Georgia specifically, it is without question COVID. That there is nothing that focuses the mind like the credible threat of death.
Yes.
And when we look at a place like Georgia, where 12 hospitals in rural Georgia are slated to close, where there was a hospital in Randolph County, which is in Southwest Georgia, that closed days before the November election. And hospitals are not only places where people go to get well, where people go to have babies, it's also tends to be the largest employer in many parts of the country, many parts of the world. And so it is a problem that folks are trying to take away healthcare in the middle of a pandemic. So without question, across the board, across race, age, geography, and gender, it's COVID. The caveat that I would add is that for women, it's COVID as a healthcare issue. Right? How do I keep myself safe? How do I keep my family safe? How do I stay alive? And for men, it tends to be COVID as an economic issue, right? We're talking about massive job loss. We're talking about possibly 400,000 Georgians facing eviction by the beginning of 2021. And that will have a huge impact on how people live their lives over the next couple of days, weeks, months, years. And so those are the issues. Again, COVID as a healthcare issue, COVID as an economic issue, and race and racism, and how it affects us in public life and in our private lives.
Well, thank you. That's incredibly interesting, especially the breakdown between the genders. I had no idea how women and men were viewing it so differently. So we have another question. Let's talk specifically about your digital organizing strategy and inline techniques. You've engaged on video game platforms, we've heard, and also blockchain. Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about that? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, as a part of our organizing tactics is to meet people where they are. And Gen Zers and millennials, but even beyond that. So let me take a step back. We've been doing some industry research. 50% of gamers are women. About 80% of Black men and boys say that they play at least 2 hours of video games a week. So when we start thinking about like, hey, when we had to shut down on March 9th because of COVID and concerns around it, our goals have not shifted. Our goals didn't change, right? We were focused on, okay, we have to shift tactics. How do we figure out, how do we continue to have authentic, meaningful conversations with people? And so we took to video games. We realized that we didn't have enough money to advertise within some of the popular video games. So we started to build our own. We noticed that, Twitch is a really powerful platform where people are playing video games, watching other people play video games, that these esports players and professional video game players are legitimately, they're influencers. And so we wanted to have conversations like, what do they think about the upcoming elections? What are they talking about? What matters to them? What do they care about? And so that is where the Twitch the Vote idea came from. So on National Voter Registration Day, we registered 9,000 people to vote on one day because of our Twitch the Vote streaming platform. On Election Day, we had nearly 500,000 unique viewers to our Election Day live stream on Twitch the Vote. So we had really popular professional video game players, but then we also had Dr. Mae Jameson, who was the first Black woman and NASA astronaut to travel into space, right? We had Beyonce's mom come by and talk to Georgia voters about how important the vote is. And so, yeah, I think that we will leverage everything that we have access to, every platform, any technology that we have, any data, any analysis that we have to build the bigger we in We the People.
I love that. And, you know, I keep waiting for Will Shortz to do a crossword for the New York Times with election information. And I'm like, I'm right there. Come on, Will, you can do it.
I know. I love that. That's brilliant. Okay.
I know, we'll get on the phone with him or something like that.
Julia, just send him a text.
Oh, yes, of course. He'll answer, of course. Thank you so much for your time. Anything before we get off the phone, what would be your last message about encouraging everybody for this? You know, we have so few days left. What would you say people should be doing right now to get out the vote and helping with all the work that we have to do?
So I will say, so first of all, mobilized.us / the New Georgia Project.
We got that on Facebook and on our channel here, guys. We'll share it with everybody in the email too.
Thank you. Let me see, mobilized.us /
Don just posted it.
Oh,
okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it.
Oh,
I don't type nearly as fast as I think I do. But listen, December 7th is the voter registration deadline. December 14th is when early voting starts. And January 5th is not election day, it is the last day to vote. That we want to shift the thinking and shift the culture of voting, that people can request their ballot and request it as soon as possible. Holiday mail is notoriously wonky. And then we take into account the attacks on the Postal Service. And it makes it that much more important that people not delay. Don't be like me and procrastinate and then get mad at yourself when you don't have time to do a good job. To request your ballot as soon as possible, and if you aren't able to vote early and in person. And if you have people in Georgia, to reach out to them, that hearing from an authentic a person that you have an authentic relationship with is actually really powerful in moving people to act. And if you have time and the capacity and the ability to, then we would love to have people volunteer. And if you can't do any of those things, help amplify our message to follow us at New Georgia Project on all social media platforms. We're on TikTok, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. Follow us and help us amplify our messages, because while there hasn't been a lot of attention paid to bad actors, particularly foreign bad actors, that the tactics that we saw in the 2016 election are very much still at play. Misinformation and disinformation campaigns still have an impact on how people are receiving information. And the way that we combat that is not by retweeting and saying, look at these lies. It's by amplifying good information from trusted messengers. And so again, I invite you all to join us in amplifying information that folks can rely on over the next 34 days.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We so appreciate it. Best of luck. Good. And we're pulling for you guys. We're working hard, and we really appreciate you taking a moment to drop by and say hello to everybody.
For sure. Thank you so much.
All right. See you soon. Ciao.
Okay, ciao.
And before everyone gets off the call, I just want to remind you, please make sure you've reached out to every Georgia voter abroad that you know to make sure they've registered and downloaded their ballot. Remember, just as like Nse was saying, right now the postal system is slow. So ask people if they to get started now. Probably it's safer to send your ballot back by courier than by post, unless you're pretty close to the, unless your postal system is really speedy. If anybody needs help, we are here for you at voteformabroad.org. And we really hope you've enjoyed today's call. We enjoyed it very much. We loved our speakers dropping by. And we also just want to say thank you so much for your support. It goes a long way. We are doing LinkedIn ads right now that are targeting Georgia voters through their universities and through their workplaces. They're really targeted ads, and we really appreciate your support, making sure we can reach as many people as possible who are on those targeted lists. Please visit democratsabroad.org/donate so that we can continue to reach these Georgians abroad and help us be the margin of victory and carry the baton over the finish line again, just as we did for the Biden-Harris win. We also would love your support as a volunteer. Just go sign up at democratsabroad.org/volunteer to get involved. And we're going to be sending around a bunch of links to everybody so that in case you miss them in the chat box or on Facebook, you'll have them right in your email. With that, we will sign off. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Albert. Thank you, Chris, for joining us today. And y'all have a great morning, afternoon, and evening. Ciao, everyone.
Thanks so much. Thank you.